Okay, thank you for the kind introduction and hello everyone. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'll kind of summarize the journal, and our publication process is a little bit different than other journals. So I'll go through the details there, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to add any questions you may have to the Q&A section, and we can address those towards the end. Okay, so I will get started. Okay, so here's a brief outline of my presentation today. So I'm going to talk about JoVE's history, some of the benefits publishing with JoVE, talk about the publishing process itself, and then a quick Q&A, as I mentioned. Okay, so let's begin with the history of the company. So this is Moshe, our CEO. So he founded the company in 2006. And a big reason for his founding of the company was some experiences that he had during his postdoc. So in many cases, he and other lab members were traveling to different countries to train on various, I believe this one was a surgical technique, but also some biochemical techniques as well. So he was in the US at the time at Princeton, and he traveled to Scotland to train on on a technique. It took about 2 months and cost about $10,000 to replicate this. So I'm sure it was a beautiful trip in Scotland, but not exactly the most efficient way to learn a technique, So this is when Moshe came up with the idea of why not create a video of a methodology, and this can allow other scientists to replicate the experiment or the technique. So you can, instead of traveling, you can just send them a copy of the video file. They can look at it in detail, and this can really help them with replication. And as I'm sure you're all aware, there is a bit of a replication reproducibility crisis in science, and particularly in the life sciences, there is a lot of results that can't be replicated, and many times that's um, something further upstream. It's the people being unable to replicate the actual methodology. And I'm sure you've all encountered this as well. You're looking in a method section of a paper, trying to find the original description of this method, and it's kind of a downward spiral. You see links, citations within citations, circular circular citations, and you can never actually find, in many cases, you can never actually find the original. So there is, there are some issues with reproducibility. So um, so as Moshe learned, written protocols are not clear, and this a lot of times requires traveling. So this really hurts science and slows things down, costs money. So the journal's mission is to advance science by increasing reproducibility, efficiency of knowledge transfer. And what I mean by that is knowledge transfer within the lab or or outside of the lab. So for example, if you have a postdoc in your lab who's an expert on a particular technique, and they're leaving, they're moving on to another position, you don't want to lose that knowledge. So creating a JoVE video within your lab, you can use that video for training current incoming scientists. Okay, so let me just give you an example of a case where the text manuscript is inadequate and a video can really help. So one of the most helpful topics is surgical techniques. And this is a surgical technique. Um, this is a surgical technique done on larvae. So you can see here, this is the text article. Um, it's very, it's very brief. I don't think I would be able to replicate it by just reading this brief description. However, these are some screenshots from the video, and you can see a lot more spatial information and temporal information. So you can see the angle that the forceps are at. You can see all the outside of the microscope things. You can see this syringe, micro manipulators. You can see the angles that they're in. You can see the lighting. And then perhaps most importantly, you can see through the ocular. So we film, we use adapter to film through the ocular, and you can really gain a lot of detail, which is not present in this very basic text description. Okay, so I mentioned these first two already, and some of the other ones are um, when you're writing grants, there's in many cases there's a section where it asks about reproducibility, how you can demonstrate that your experiments are reproducible. In many cases, people they'll publish a JoVE video and cite that in their grant application, and they can use that as a way to demonstrate to the granting agencies that they're capable of reproducing the experiment. This can also increase your visibility throughout the scientific community. So I've been at a lot of conferences, and people, in many cases, if they have a new methodology, which they've published in JoVE, they present this at the conference. And also they can share on social media um, and academic websites. Just really, it's good exposure for yourself as a scientist. Okay, so JoVE's scope is very broad. As you can see here, we have 13 different sections. The majority of them are life science, just because that's what our CEO worked on as a postdoc. So when he began the journal, it was mostly, biology, um, cancer research, genetics, basic science concepts. However, we've expanded into physical sciences. So we now have chemistry, engineering, which is applied physics. We also have a clinical medicine section and environment section. So we aim to cover most areas of science, and we are always expanding into new areas. Okay, and the types of methods that we recruit are very diverse. So our preference is always novel methods, so cutting edge methods that have recently been developed. It can also be an adaptation of an already existing technique. Let's say you're using using a new reagent, or the technique has already been tested and well developed in mice, but now you're creating a new protocol where the same experiment is done in rabbits, let's say, for example. So that's another common one. And it can also be gold standard protocols, very well established. And in fact, these sometimes people are reluctant to publish gold standard techniques, but they are, in many cases, they are the videos that get the most attention, the most views, just because of their well-established nature. Many people across the world are using them for replication. Okay, so I can talk about some of our newer sections. So like I said, it's mostly life sciences, but we do now have um, a medicine section, which we've had for quite a while, but it's mostly been animal models. So now we are expanding into some clinical areas, including human surgeries, diagnostics, therapeutics. So all aspects of clinical medicine. And we also have an environment section, environmental science, which is it's almost always some type of field work, whether that's environmental chemistry, toxicity, animal studies. So that's another less common one, but it is a possibility. This brings me to computational methods, and this is becoming more and more popular, especially with AI. So we do, we prefer to have a very dynamic video with a lot of action shots. But that being said, we can publish in silico methods as long as the user can show some type of demonstration with usually with screen captures. They'll kind of talk about and demonstrate what they're doing on their computer, going through various steps, as long as there's some kind of graphical user interface. Okay, so this brings me to probably the most important part, and that is the publication process itself. So, as you know, each JoVE article has a video component. It also has a text manuscript to accompany that. And these are both components are published and indexed in PubMed and all the other scientific indexing sites, Google Scholar, Scopus, SciFinder. And the text is actually where the publication process starts. So this is an overview of the entire process. I'll talk about it in general terms, and then we'll go through in detail. Okay, so the first step would be, let's see here. The first step is manuscript preparation. So an editor would work with you to create the manuscript. And it's very similar to any other methodology paper, like a neuroscience methods, nature methods paper. It has all your typical sections with a couple exceptions. So the first exception is the protocol section is very detailed in a JoVE paper. So you can see here, it's it's designed like an outline, and it's extremely detailed. So that's the other thing I'll mention. The level of detail is about 2 or 3 times more detailed than a typical methods paper, and I will explain why in a couple minutes. The next part is the results section. So there is a results section, just like any paper, but we don't require novel results. So it can be either representative results just to show to demonstrate that the methodology functions correctly, or it can also be results from a previously published paper. So that you're welcome to do that as well, as long as you ask permission from the original journal. Or you can actually include novel results. So that's something that is a little less common, but it is a possibility. Okay, so that once the manuscript is submitted, it goes to our peer review team who conducts the peer review on the manuscript. And it's a traditional single blind external peer review. We can select the reviewers for you, or you're welcome to select them yourself. It's also an option. And let's see. Okay, so goes through the peer review. Once the manuscript is accepted, the manuscript itself will be published on our website with a little message that says video coming soon. So this allows us to, many scientists are eager to have their publication index in PubMed as quickly as possible so they can add it to their CV. This allows for that, so they can, as soon as the text is indexed in PubMed, then you will have the citation. You can use it on your CV, and then the video will take a couple more weeks to complete, and then that will be added. So the process of the video production starts with script writing. So we have a team of PhD science writers, and they, based on the original text manuscript, they convert that into a video script and a storyboard, which kind of describes all the video shots that will be done during the day of filming. And we provide this to the authors well in advance of the day of filming. You know, we travel to their lab and do the filming. They have time to go over it and make any suggestions. And the next thing is the actual day of filming. So here's a couple examples. You know, it's usually consists of a brief interview with the PI in the beginning, so you know, talking about the technique from a big picture perspective. And then in many cases, it's a you know, a postdoc or graduate student will um, demonstrate the technique. And this is a very common question. You know, do I have to memorize the script? This is not necessarily required. So we can do professional voiceovers afterwards. And you know, during the day of filming, you wouldn't have to speak. You can just um, film the technique, and then we can add the audio and the voiceovers afterwards. Okay, so after the filming is done, the next step is the post-production editing. And I mentioned this already, the voiceover. After the video is ready, we show the final copy to the authors. They're welcome to make any suggestions or changes, and then it is ready to be published. So the video itself will go on our website. It will be indexed in PubMed along with the video, along with the text. And we do have video teams throughout the world. So in almost every country, every region, we do have videographers, including India. So all of the entirety of India has videographer teams. There is also an option. So that's I would say 90% of authors choose to have JoVE create the video for them. There's also a second option, which is less common, and this is creating the video yourself. So this is, you know, in many cases, if there's certain circumstances where we may not be able to film there. For example, um, if it's in a surgical theater, sterile environment, sometimes this can be challenging. Although we have done it. Other cases are the environmental studies. You know, this can be in a very remote area in, you know, the desert or the forest or something like this. So in cases like that, the authors will usually create the video themselves, and then we can edit and modify the video for them. Okay, so that is the entire publication process. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.